On this episode of The Live Life, we're talking about an agency approach to creative services and more on The Live Life.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by Middle Atlantic. What great systems are built on.
This is The Live Life, episode 31, an agency approach to creative services for live events, part 1. Welcome to The Live Life, where we bring you influential people and topics related to the selling, planning, designing, producing, and delivering of live events. I'm your host, Wallace Johnson, where you can find me on Twitter at WallaceCTS. And on today's episode, we're going to discuss the details of building an agency approach to offering creative services and how that can benefit live event production companies. Joining me today are two people who are highly experienced in this, Lindsay Grinstead and Bill Boris-Schacter of Tonic Consulting Group. So welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
No problem. So wanted the audience to kick off and hear a little bit about each of yourselves and how you got into the live event industry.
Lindsay, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I think like many people really just stumbled into the live event industry, to be perfectly honest. I was looking for a job out of college and had moved to San Francisco, and through kind of family connections found Jack Morden. And all of a sudden, as I started doing my research and looking into what they did, I'd always loved the theater. I'd always loved performing. I'd always loved being a part of kind of something on the stage. And it didn't occur to me that corporations also did that. And so I was hooked immediately with kind of the thrill of corporate events. And, 16 years later, I'm still here. So it hooked me and grabbed me almost immediately. But it was all by accident.
That's right. Nobody's actually looking for the industry. We all just seem to just, how did I get here?
Right.
I think that's absolutely true. I think it's all by accident. I was looking for some sort of job in filmmaking, and I walked into a place called the Slide Shop, and it had a camera and it had film. And I said, well, that's close enough to filmmaking. And I took the job. And that was sort of the start of the whole multi-image industry was happening around the same time. So I was making special effects slides for slideshows. And that industry started becoming really, really significant and creative and fun. Particularly once I moved up to Boston. I actually came up to Boston to go to law school, but it was so exciting to be part of the multi-image industry, particularly in New England, which was a hotbed of storytelling, that it became very attractive. And even though I graduated law school and promised my mother I would look for a job, I kept doing multi-image, and I'm very happy I did, because along the way, we were able to be part of this corporate theater that was happening at the time, in which corporations were creating these great events as a result of having the ability to have multiple slide projectors behind a presenter in a large audience capacity. Eventually, I moved through various small boutiques, becoming a producer of events and then an executive producer of events, and finally landed at a startup office for Jack Morden in Boston. And we started with 7 people, and by the end of my tenure within that office, it was 125 people. At which point we had bought our largest competitor and been bought by a publicly traded company and expanded our footprint to be international. And some of the international operations needed some help around our brand and who we were and how Jack Morden did its business. And so I raised my hand and said, I'll go help out someplace. And I went down to Australia with my family and lived down there for a year and worked with the leadership down there to sort it out and get them grounded in how we do what we do. It was a fabulous, fabulous experience. I was also down there for 9/11. So when I returned, the world was completely different. And my job was of leadership within the Boston office was not where it had been when I left. And so my CEO asked me to start helping out in other parts of the organization. And that's really when my consulting chops started getting developed. I started moving around from office to office, helping the leadership in those offices to do their work better, to solve problems for them, to help them generate business, to create best practices and best standard operating procedures for the organization, first in the US, and then my remit expanded to worldwide. And I was put on the executive team for Jack Morden and was there for a number of years, helping to manage all the strategy for the agency worldwide. Then my transition happened where my wife got a good job, my kids were launched. I looked around and I said, gee, I've been at Jack Morden for 24 years. What else could I do that might be fun and exciting? And consulting was the thing that attracted me. And so I ended up heading out and becoming a consultant, and Lindsay and I started working together.
No, that's a fantastic story. I do have to ask, so how many times in your career at Jack Morden did you say, I should have really been a lawyer? Especially working with the live event environment clients and things just happen and you're looking around one day, you're like, oh, it would have been easier.
It's interesting because I know a lot of lawyers. I'm friends with a lot of them. And I have to say, I never regretted going into the law work is not nearly as exciting. It's not nearly as fun. It's not nearly, and we all hate lawyers, although these days lawyers are becoming our heroes again. So that's great. But the law work is a lot of reading and writing and thinking, and the show is the buzz. The show is great, and that's what I love about the live event industry. And so I haven't regretted it. My parents might have regretted it.
No, fantastic. So now you guys are at Tonic Consulting Group. You've both spent a number of years with Jack Morden. And so I'm curious, what from working there for so long with such a vast experience did you learn that is beneficial to you and your careers moving forward, in building Tonic Consulting Group?
I think one of the biggest things that I learned, one of kind of my key takeaways when I look back at my time at Jack, so I was an account director. So I was responsible for being the eyes and ears of the client internally, as well as representing our team externally to the clients. And I think through my time, I really understood the value of a relationship and understand the value of the trust that you create, not just with your client, but with your internal team as well. And, as you're balancing these really complex projects and you're producing these complex events, you have lots of moving pieces and lots of different personalities internally as well as on the client side. And so, I really found that not just executing something for a client, but truly understanding who they are and what makes them tick and what keeps them up at night and what value can we as an agency bring to them was one of my biggest takeaways. I think the second thing that I really took away from it is that is how do you get out of that place of being a commodity to a client where they can price check you and they're just price shopping,
Mm-hmm.
and how can you really become more of a value, a differentiated value and a differentiated service, and whatever it is that you're doing. So you're providing them solutions and kind of keeping one step ahead of the client so that you are thinking through those solutions so that they don't have to. And how are you going to differentiate yourself from, this is a huge industry, and there's small players and there's medium-sized players and there's large players, and there are price shopping clients out there, but really finding those clients who appreciate the differentiation and the value and the strategy and the creative that you bring. I think those are the two key takeaways that I have, and that I use almost daily when I'm now as a consultant, coaching clients on both the value of relationships and the value of really differentiating yourselves.
So for myself, obviously I was in charge of operations for Jack Morden, so I learned a whole lot about best practices and standard operating procedures and how to implement them and how to communicate them throughout a distributed organization that Jack was. But in thinking about this, my real knowledge that was developed was part of when I was on the executive team and was all around brand management. And the Jack Morden brand has gone through a huge amount of transition. When I first started, it was called Jack Morden Productions. It went through a number of different identities along the way and ended up with the Jack Morden Worldwide and really being a brand experience agency and truly a broad marketing services company. And knowing that the challenges that are inherent in that type of transition, understanding the challenges both internally and communicating this to all of the employees and getting them to understand what our brand meant at the time and where we were trying to go. And then also working with our marketing group and with the external effort to ensure that the message is getting out into the marketplace. That was just eye-opening. That was just an amazing experience and something that Lindsay and I have been doing a lot within the Tonic experience, because that brand messaging, both internally and externally, is absolutely key for any organization to be able to be successful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, sounds like a wealth of experience and a lot of lessons learned. Today with your customers, they come in various shapes, sizes, small, medium, large, producing events, trying to put on events based on your experience. As a highlight, what problems would you say you help your customers solve?
So I think the number one reason someone calls us is they want to grow. They're challenged with growth, and they think they know why that might be, but more often than not, we're able to uncover that there's more of a root problem, or fundamental challenge that they have. But one of the things that Bill and I, one of the reasons we started Tonic is, from an account side, I kind of bring the sales background and some marketing acumen, and Bill really has this deep operations knowledge. So we're able to look at their business holistically, and so they call us saying, I want to grow. Can you help me grow? And we're able to take it. Is it a sales issue? Is it a marketing issue? Is it an operations issue? Is it all of that? And really kind of unpack that for them and help them build solutions to achieve that growth.
And we're also finding that initially it's almost always a brand issue.
Yeah.
So going back to what I was just experiencing, that there is, everyone feels that, gee, if we just do sales, we'll be okay. If I just get more sales, we'll be okay. But in point of fact, if you don't really know what you're selling, or you don't know where your strengths are, you don't have that communication down to a science, it's not going to be successful. So we often, to the frustration sometimes of our clients, because they want to let's just do sales.
Let's sell.
Back up a little bit and really figure out who you are and how you're going to be successful. So those are the clients that we are encountering on a regular basis.
No, just in the conversations from my side of the industry now, moving to the vendor and software side, I can see where that is a desperate need. A lot of companies, think they know what they're trying to do, but they don't really understand who they're trying to do it for. And the best ways that they can market themselves to position to do that really well for those specific type of customers. And a lot of companies are trying to be everything to everybody. Whether that's through, partnerships and layers beneath, but just representing themselves, or they're stretching themselves pretty far and trying to deliver that message. So,
yeah. And we're also finding that different people have different perspective on what that brand message is within a single organization. And so that gets very complicated too, because different clients are hearing different aspects of what that company can do and where they're really good.
Indeed. So tell me, what is it specifically that you love about the AV industry?
I think I love the innovation, the technology and the innovation, and it's always evolving and always changing. And, the great companies can stay one step ahead or even innovate themselves. And I think it's just amazing to see how far this industry has come, how far kind of B2B events have come in the past 10, 15 years. And so just feeling, kind of keeping a pulse on what's happening from an innovation and technology perspective, I think is really exciting.
Yeah, it's always been a very cool place to be around technology and innovation, as Lindsay says. I think for me, what has always attracted me to the live event industry is the lights going down and the show coming on. It's just, there's an excitement there. There's a fear there.
Yes, indeed.
Back in the old days when you press play and you said, "Will it go?
Will this work?" That's right.
But that buzz that happens on show site, I think that's just a very special feeling, and all of us who are in this industry know what I'm talking about.
All right, so we're gonna go to the Back to the Future machine, time warp back.
Hopefully not too far back.
Not too far back. But I find myself laughing sometimes when I say, man, if I would have known this 10 years ago, how awesome at my job. So I'll ask both of you, if you had to go back and give some advice to your younger self or someone new coming into the industry that wants to be part of this agency and creative environment within an organization, what advice would you give them? Kind of either starting out or starting at a younger point.
Bill?
Hey. Go to law school.
Wallace, I have to admit, when Bill and I were talking about this the other day, we literally at the same time both said, "Run!" But all kidding aside, I think if I were to talk to someone who's just starting out in the agency world, I would really encourage them to get as much variety as they can. The benefit of being on the agency side versus the client side is you're working with different industries, different types of companies, small companies, large companies, and across every vertical you can imagine. And so similarly, within each organization, there are different roles. There's account roles, and there's production roles, and there's technical roles. And so I think just exposing yourself to as many different aspects of the business and then you can really choose. You can really be informed about, so where do I want to be 10 years from now? Do I like the account management side of this, or do I really love the technical, or do I want to go client side? Like, I think just as much variety as you could give yourself or expose yourself to, I think the better off you'll be.
Yeah, and getting your hands dirty, really getting into the work and really understanding the how it happens, what goes first, what goes second, how do you make these shows and these events happen. The more you get that, the more valuable you're going to be to the organization, and the more you'll be able to figure out, what do I really like, what parts are the places that I really want to play in, and then move towards that direction.
No, that's awesome, because the 2 points you just highlighted is what I tell people first overall is, one, get variety. When I came up in the industry, sitting in one environment was just not working out for me. So I had to get to different scenarios, different environments to, see and feel, what goes on, throughout, various places. And the other piece, Bill, is the thing I tell people all the time: understand the how.
Yeah.
How you do what you do is so critical and so important to accelerating your career.
I actually think the best account directors are the ones that came up through production or understood what the production thing was, and the best production folks are ones that understood how to sell and how to develop relationships. It's all you got to do it all, including creative. If creative has that background as well, they're that much more valuable, because then they come up with ideas that actually can be done, as opposed to, well, we can't do that.
Right.
Yeah. Save that thought, because that's a whole nother show right there. That's a very big discussion on what is the best upbringing for certain roles in the industry. So hold that thought. Cool. Well, let's get into the main topic of this podcast here is to talk about the agency approach of building an exceptional experience. And so many years ago, umpteen years ago, live event staging companies started adding creative services as part of a service offering that they would offer to help that differential process and uncommoditize themselves to the industry. And so they started doing things, all things related to content, videos, motion graphics, things like that. Is this still a good approach today in your thoughts to add these services or partner with agencies who are putting on the services? Because that's the other piece too, where, now you see more true agencies working with technology companies to produce these events, in a dual partnership role. So what's your take on kind of where the industry sits today on, do you do it yourself or do you partner up?
Well, in any business, you want to try and get higher up in the food chain and not be just a tactical deliverer of a widget or a thing, but actually create a solution for your client that they look at as a value add and an ability to really see you as a solution finder. So, adding that creative aspect to it is part of it because it allows you to really think innovatively around both problem solving and what type of equipment or what type of things are needed in order to make this happen. But it is a double-edged sword. You do have to be careful about it because a lot of the AV industry works for other elements of the AV industry. And if you're overlapping capabilities between those other elements, it can be threatening and confusing. So, you want to make sure that it is something that is that you're really able to deliver and that is something that is very value added to the client that you're talking to. And one client may need really high level, big picture creative, and another client may just need some simple problem solving. So it's not a one size fits all solution, but it is a way of getting up in the food chain for sure.
But I think to Bill's earlier point, while it is a great option for a business, and I think it's a great path to growth and getting out of that commodity space and differentiating yourself, you also want to ensure that you as an agency or you as a company are very clear on what services you can provide. Because the word creative, just like the word production, is this very broad word that means very different things to every single person you talk to. And so something we've seen very often is that companies latch on creative onto their capabilities, or even content. They put content onto their list of capabilities, and it becomes very confusing. And then sometimes they end up kind of overextending themselves because the client sees creative and thinks of it as something different than what they intended it to be. And so I think this comes back to understanding your brand, understanding your positioning, and everyone internally being able to very clearly articulate where you play and where you don't.
And Lindsay, it sounds like you started to go into the next step that I was thinking of is, you have a company that say they're not doing this and they're coming to you and saying, we want to, get out the rat race and not be a commodity and build. They want to move up the food chain. What are some things they have to assess, pros and cons of whether they offer the service internally and build out their own department, or, what they need to assess and trying to find a partner that they can offer these services through?
I think one of the first things they need to assess is who are their current clients. And if they add this capability into their portfolio, how will their current clients react to that? And will their current clients buy that from them? Or are they now looking for new clients? And will their current clients consider them a threat? As Bill mentioned, I think it's a double-edged sword. And so I think, an agency has to be very clear about, are we reinventing ourselves to a new set of clients, or are we now repositioning ourselves to our existing clients? And how is that going to go over them? Because what we have seen is there is the potential of almost cannibalizing your existing client base by latching on additional creative services. And so I think just really understanding who do you sell to now and who will you sell to when you add this service in is one of the first critical steps.
I also think that you really need to be true to your brand. And so what your reputation right now is in the marketplace is something that you need to build upon. And if you try and go completely, turn a 180 degrees from your reputation that you have, you're going to have a really hard challenge in convincing clients that you can do this whole new thing that is so far from what you were doing. So what you really want to try and do is build upon the strength that you have and enhance that strength. So if you're really good at creating unique equipment packages that are very innovative, then build upon that creatively and get that to be a bigger offering. But finding that specialty, finding that niche, and being able to then enhance it is the way that will be most likely be successful.
I'm not sure, Wallace, we could underscore the importance of the niche enough. Like it is, we have seen really great success for companies when they understand what niche they're playing in and then maximize that versus, like I mentioned earlier, the blanket statement of creative, because you are then competing with the Jack Mordens of the world and the George P's and the Freemans. You're competing with really big guys. Whereas if you take, like Bill said, what you're good at and then optimize that and grow that, your competition pool is less and your potential client set will really understand who you are. So it's like we are like banging this like own your niche drum right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Be really, really good at one thing versus mediocre at a lot of things.
Yes, for sure.
Exactly. And then when you do find your niche, whatever that might be, make sure you deliver on that. You got to have the chops. And so if you don't have the right skill sets in-house, then you're going to have to bring it in if that's the direction you want to go in. And you're going to have to make the investment to make that happen, because the worst thing that could happen is that you put it out there saying, we do this, and then you don't do it very well.
No. And we're going to get to that. Before I ask that question, let me ask this question. What is experiential marketing, and why do live event companies keep using this term so often? I see it pop up all of a sudden, and I see it on Event Marketer, and I'm like, okay, the agency world, I get it. But then live event companies like, yes, we offer experiential marketing. And it's like, all right, like, am I a lab rat? Like, what's going on?
Apparently you are. I think it was a term of art that came about as part of the transition that a lot of production companies were going through to try and elevate their brand out of, we just deliver this event, to, gee, we can help you craft all your messages. And it was a way of getting people to think more broadly about that organization because they are experiential as opposed to just production. But Lindsay and I have found that both of those words, production and experiential, are becoming so ubiquitous and so generic and mean so many different things to so many different people that they're almost useless. They don't really convey any type of specialty or niche, or expertise, and that's a challenge.
Yeah, it's funny, Bill, I'd never really thought about it this way, but it's almost as though the term came about so we could all get out of the ballroom. Like we can create the full experience. So now we're not a production company because the production company is just doing your keynote.
Right.
We're experiential, and we can touch multiple layers of your event.
Got it. I will struggle with that more. No, it's very true. That term, the term production, we try to get away from the term, audiovisual and use event technology. And even that term now has expanded to where apps and virtual reality and, to a certain degree, certain people say, activations are happening with event technology. So yeah, the terms of the industry are struggling right now for translation. Help someone help. So Bill, prior to that question, you were talking about having the right people with the right skill set to, create this work and be able to deliver on, what's being put out there from a company. Does the personnel that, typically is involved with the creative element, or or this agency approach of supporting a client and their content, their keynote, their messaging, is it best that they have event experience?
I would say yes, but at the same time, it is not something that people can't learn. And bringing in an outside resource that has a brand new perspective, that has an understanding of, the key is having an understanding of communications, and being able to address that understanding in a myriad of ways, whether it be through technology or whether it be through content development or big picture thinking. There's lots of different types of creatives out there. It certainly would be helpful for them to have live event experience. Almost everybody on the planet at this point has been to a live event,
right?
Whether it be a concert, or whether it be a consumer activations, or whether it be a sales meeting or a product meeting within their own company. What they haven't experienced is the backroom stuff, this way of getting it to that place. And by not having that experience, you do have this danger of coming up with creative that really can't be done in the time period and budget and parameters that are being set by the client. But that is not something that I think is insurmountable. I think that you can still do that. So the key really is that I think that what you really want is to have people that can really passionately tell a story. And if they can do that and do it really, really well, that's gold. That's what you want.
Lindsay, coming from the account management side, what's your take on, just the background of, somebody coming into that creative environment, having event experience? Does it help them, that much more, or does that new, fresh perspective generally come in more open-minded?
I think you can see both. I think to Bill's point, having that event experience is great. However, a good, smart, creative, strategic, big picture thinker, like I can't teach that. I can teach the event. We can teach how you translate something small to a really large stage, or how do you activate and engage an audience. Like things like that I think can be taught, but finding that really smart creative person, that's why, quite frankly, that's why creatives charge so much, because it is, they can demand a higher hourly rate or project rate, because what they do, not everyone can do what they do.
No, it makes total sense. Now, from a staffing level standpoint, kind of want to talk through maybe some pros and cons of, is it best to have as many full-time staff as possible that are dedicated to this on your team, or is it possible to have that same experience built through using freelancers that can deliver this experience?
So I've often found that it's a healthy mix of both. And, you only want the industry is ripe with really great freelancers. And I think agencies and companies who can embrace bringing in contractors or permalancers or whatever it is to help enhance their projects on an as needed basis will ultimately succeed, because it's obviously you're not carrying the overhead of a full-time employee. As the account person, a lot of the accounts that I managed were really fast turnaround projects. So I had to become very comfortable and flexible leveraging freelance support, whether it was in production or creative. I think my only piece of advice would be, it's always a challenge, and I think this is why you get the pushback, is it's a challenge if a freelancer owns the client relationship. I've never had a problem with a freelancer having conversations with a client. Sometimes we were even very transparent that they weren't on staff. But you want to make sure that in order to stay sticky with that client, you have an account person or a producer. You have multiple other people touching the account, not just your freelancer.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And the other thing to realize is that in a project-based world, freelancing is just part of the business environment that you're going to be in, because to have staff when you don't have a project is not cost effective and will drag down your business. So to be able to flex your staff and be able to build up when you have the work and then come back down when you don't is critical. So you have to figure out how to make that work for you. You have to figure out where those freelancers are, the ones that you can trust, the ones that deliver for you. They are as much of an asset that you're giving to your client as your staff is.
Lindsay, back to the points you made, when you in the creative environment, you have an account manager, you have a producer that, are managing the client. But when, you're dealing with creative, that freelancer may be the one that's, building the vision and building the product, and they're the ones who you can try to translate what the client said to them. But like I said, hearing it direct and getting them involved directly is a critical step, especially in creative. But the concern is definitely there. If they're too involved, then now the client's going direct to them and having these conversations, and you could feel like the relationship is slipping away. How were you able to be successful in managing that, essentially micromanaging that, to where, did you feel you had to be part of every conversation, or how did the communication funnel through you? What were some of the things that you did to be successful in managing that relationship? Because I think that's where companies starting out, Bill, as you said, they can't run out and hire 5 people, day one and say, we're going to do this. So their approach is going to be probably outsourcing in the beginning with maybe one producer or project manager, a person on staff, working with the salesperson, account manager, and then bringing in the outsourced resource to manage this relationship. So, yeah,
I think you hit the nail on the head. It can be a very tricky tightrope to walk. I think it needs to be balanced. I think one of my approaches wasn't to micromanage it. I never want to pitch another creative's work, whether they're on staff or freelance. They built this. It is their vision. They are going to have more passion. I used to get so excited listening to creatives pitch their work. And so I would definitely be involved because I'm there, but I would be involved if they were on staff as well. I want to be involved. I want to hear the pitch first because I know the client and I can help cater the presentation to what the client's going to, what they've asked for, or how they're going to respond. And then similarly, the creatives in the room pitching, and they're giving it their all, and I can be watching the client's body language and thinking about, and hearing what they're saying, so that when we leave the room, we can, revise the creative solution accordingly. So that was the first piece. I didn't try to micromanage it. I let it happen kind of naturally and fluidly, yet stayed involved as I would have if they were on staff. And I think one thing that I would just remind, anyone that's kind of dipping their toe into this water is freelancers, their lifeblood is the agency. And so a good freelancer wants work, and they want to work with other agencies. And so I'm not going to say never, but I cannot recall an experience where I had a trusted freelancer. They were developing a relationship with one of my clients, and then they walked with the client. Like they would be blacklisted in this production world if they did that. And so I think, the good freelancers out there understand and respect the relationship that an agency has with their clients.
I have to agree with Lindsay on that. And I have a purview that went across all of Jack Morden, and we were regularly had clients that were trying to go directly to our freelancers.
Mm-hmm.
And the freelancer would give us a call. And say, hey, I got the client calling me. What do I do?
Right.
Call the client and say, I hear you want to, work with so-and-so. There's this trust factor that has to happen in this industry in order for these freelancers to be able to be successful. And they know that, and we know that, and it's just part of life. And we even talk to our clients about it. And in contracts, you should have a clause within your contract that says you can't hire anybody directly from, agency X unless you have permission from us.
I've also found it was actually a good sales technique. I know this is a little bit deviating a little bit, but I had a client who fell in love with one of our freelancers. And so we could have those conversations of, well, I need, if I have more visibility into what upcoming projects we have and how much business we can support, that eventually, the client kind of came around and gave us more business, and we were able to eventually hire the freelancer full time. So you can use it to your advantage as a little bit of a sales technique.
No, I like that. Especially, like I say, as a group that is, either starting or have started and are growing, the full-time model just doesn't make cost-effective sense. So as they're trying to grow and build their team, if they can get more work out of the client with using more resources, and their resources likes the environment, the culture, and all these other things, then it all works out. They can join full-time. You keep the client has the resource. Everybody wins.
Everyone wins.
Fantastic. So earlier you talked about, companies trying to find their niche and tell their story and represent their brand properly. And then you have companies that are offering creative services that, offer so much, broad spectrum, too big of a picture. And so, you look at that and you say, okay, they do good creative work, but yet, their internal marketing aspect of telling their own story is too wide and too diverse. Does it help to have a good storyteller on staff that can maybe look at the company itself and help with that story? Or is that something that, sometimes it really just does take somebody from the outside looking in and saying, knock, knock, not quite what it needs to be here? Does having that storyteller maybe help to where, have you guys walked in an environment that says, man, we're talking with the staff and this person's a really good storyteller. So as we, build these best practices and help them, get direction on what their story is, teaching them how to, own that within the company with what they do so great for other clients?
It's hard. I mean, part of what makes us successful, Tonic successful, is the fact that organizations have a really hard time looking at themselves objectively and deciding what their strengths are and who they are and what they're going to deliver and how they're going to deliver it. And that's, whether you're a good storyteller or not, doesn't really matter. You have these blinders on as being part of this organization on a day-to-day basis that creates a certain perspective that it's really hard to get out of that box. Whereas when you bring in an outsider, like a consulting firm, we're able to walk in and pretty quickly get a sense of, oh, you guys are this. And we'll talk about that. And sometimes we'll find ourselves changing our minds also, because as we're hearing what they're saying, things progress into a different direction. But that's part of the excitement of what we do, because we're able to really make it resonate for them and really allow them to realize, oh yeah, that's what we're really good at. That's who we are. That's where I want to be. That's where I want to go. How do I get there? And what are the actions that I need to take to get there? So storytelling is critical within an organization, absolutely. But that storytelling is mostly about, once they've come up with their story, how do they get that out to their clients and internally to their staff to make sure everyone understands what the story is.
Got it. No. Clear that up. Okay. But now because in my head I always say, well, why is it that, they can tell the client story so much better than they can tell their own story? But, looking at the people who are telling the client story and leading that staff, where they fit in the organization sometimes, and the organization story, it now clicks on some of the brands that I see that tell a really good story about themselves and a customer story, and the organizational structure and where those key storytellers are within the structure. So,
yeah. The other thing that we're finding as well is that when you're in these small growing organizations or small or mid-sized organizations that are trying to grow, you're very, very, very busy.
Yes.
And you don't really have the time to sit back and think about, where's my brand and where do I want it to be and how am I going to get it there? And you'd love to have that time. You'd love to be able to do it, but you just don't have the time. And Lindsay and I are positioning Tonic as something that gives you more time.
Right.
You help implement whatever it is that we're suggesting you do, as opposed to just, say, hey, you should do this and then walk on to our next client. And we give extra arms, extra legs, extra time in order to do that.
No, great point.
And the consultant should do that, to be quite honest.
Absolutely. Hey, it's your host Wallace here. We had to cut the interview short as the conversation went well past our typical show length. Part 2 will post soon, and the conversation topics will pick up with best practices on gaining experience as a creative service provider, setting your pricing structure, and the mindset of the customer when selecting a creative partner. We hope you join us for Part 2. So see you soon on the next episode of The Live Life.